Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently February 25th, 2010, and this is Day 9 Daily number 77. I've been revealed. Oh, yes. Oh my god. Whoa, easy there, webcam. No, don't go over there. Yes, guys, today I actually am going to be getting to talk about StarCraft 2, and I didn't think I would because Blizzard patched StarCraft 2 like at 4 or something, or around 5 today. So I literally didn't have access to Battle.net. So I didn't have access to any of the replays I was going to do today until like 10 minutes before I went live. So I was like, whew, that was close. And Blizzard actually did a brilliant thing. I love this. When you load up StarCraft 2, if you click on an old replay to load up, it just says, we're going to boot into an old version so you can watch this. So that's what it does. So it might take a little bit longer just to load these things up, but that's okay because there's plenty of stuff to talk about in between the replays. Let me just pull my mic over here without knocking over my split pea soup, which is really, really good. And for any of you who are wondering what brand it is, it's Chunky's Split Pea and Ham Soup. Can't get enough of it. So before we get into any of today's content and today's wonderful material, by the way, thank you so much for Blizzard for actually getting it up today. We're going to, Saturday. Saturday is an MLG show match that I'll be shoutcasting with the wonderful fellows over at MLG, at Major League Gaming. If any of you are unfamiliar with them, go to www.mlgpro.com. They have phenomenal coverage of the games that they do. In particular, I always love catching their Halo 3 events, as well as their Halo 3 finals. We're going to be watching, on that Saturday event, we're going to be having Artosis, the Wikipedia of StarCraft, in a best-of-5 against the second-place WCG USA champ Louder, who, as you all know, is just a real beastly Protoss player, and has been playing a lot of Protoss since the beta was released, but Artosis has been playing random, so I'm real interested to see how they're going to play that out in that best-of-5. For any of you looking for more information, I'll definitely be putting a post up on TeamLiquid.net, and I believe Starfeeder will be releasing some information about it as well, so definitely tune into that. I'm going to make one more announcement about it at the end of this show, but with all that said, let's just go ahead and jump right into today's content. We're going to be checking out some Protoss versus Protoss action. In particular, I mean, people hear me talk about Tristan all the time, and all our little discussions. He helps me with the Team Liquid beta podcast. And I mean, I always say that it's so nice to have a training buddy, someone to practice with, someone who I can test strategies against, but a lot of people have never had that opportunity. A lot of people pretty much just get on the Icy Cup and play. And even if they did have a practice partner, it would be someone who they just played against the same way they play against an Icy Cup opponent, or essentially a random opponent. But there's a lot of advantages you get by having someone who you can tell to do stuff, or you can declare, I'm going to do this, and pretend you don't know about it. So we're going to go through some examples of what happened in a bunch of Protoss versus Protoss matches that we tried, and sort of what things came out of that, what sorts of cool learning went on. I'm going to go ahead and begin loading up the first game while StarCraft reboots. So I did want to note that, I mean, there was a whole bunch of changes that happened in the patch today. Rather than spend time discussing them today, we'll be taking care of that in the Team Liquid beta podcast. So that way, if any of you are interested in my thoughts, and of course Tristan's thoughts, since he'll be helping me with that, just watch for tomorrow for TeamLiquid.net's StarCraft 2 beta podcast. And without any further ado, let's just come right on over here and watch this game. Here I am, I'm Protoss, I'm in the top right, and here's Tristan spawning his Protoss in the bottom left. And this is the thing that I told Tristan straight up at the start of the game. I said that I had a conversation with Louder earlier on in the day, and Louder was saying that in Protoss vs. Protoss, an amazingly strong strategy was to send your first probe, like so, your sixth probe, straight away to your opponent's base on a two-player map and just build two gateways in his base on 10. So immediately I said, Tristan, I want to try this thing out. I want to see if it's as broken as Louder is implying that it is. So let's give it a shot. So here I am with my fancy split, and by that I mean Blizzard's algorithms just pretty much took care of that for me. Hooray! So here I am sending out my scouting probe, and I'll just sort of speed things up. And by the way, notice how nice this timing is. This, yeah, I sent my probe back because I'm awful for a minute, but that's okay, because look, right when it gets to 100 minerals, it gets there. A lot of people tend not to practice their cheese. They think that the idea of the cheese is what's most important, and really it's the timing plus the idea. So notice that I got right here, right as I had 100 minerals. If I were cheesing, I would always want to practice it maybe once or twice, and I would keep in mind things like, if I got there and I was at like 70 minerals, I would say, okay, I'm going to send my 7th probe instead. of my 6th probe because I got there too early. And then let's say I get there and I'm at like 120 minerals. I would say, okay, I'm going to mine until I'm halfway done with my 7th probe, and then I'm going to send one of my probes. You know, just sort of adjusting that timing. I think it's very important to, at the very least, note that, because people have a tendency to neglect it. So here I am, I'm building this thing. Now Tristan's going to be making his Nexus, or his gateway, right on 12 while chrono boosting his Nexus, or it looks like 13, which is, as of late, becoming a fairly standard timing, and I'm going ahead and doing my proxy thing. I'm not making any other probes, I don't know if that's horrible or not, but of course this is my first time attempting this proxy. And one thing that I will be very aware of is chrono boost. I can chrono boost my own gateways. Tristan, you'll note, is being very responsible about constantly chrono boosting his Nexus as though it were a real game. So here he's at 25 minerals, 25 mana on his Nexus, so he should be chrono boosting pretty normally. And he's getting another pylon. I personally think he could be gassing just a little bit earlier, but at this point, my my Zealot is almost done. And look, hey, wow, we're starting to have some ideas of how this is going to go. So again, I just want to reiterate, because I want that to be the focus of today, how is it that Tristan is helping me do this? Uh-oh, I'm getting a message on Skype. I'm going to go ahead and close that. There we go. Yeah, oh yes, Skype, I know you're very sad, but I'll come back later. Yeah, what's so nice is that, first of all, I said straight up to Tristan, play normally. Do everything you'd normally do, and don't scout the corner of your base, specifically. I mean, he knows that it's going to be there, but don't do any scouting, don't look for anything, pretend that it is as normal of a game as possible, right? That there's nothing too big going on. So now I can really see how this timing feels in a very pure sense. And by pure, I mean without any sort of influence. I want it to work the way it works in my head. Because let me tell you something. A lot of people don't do this sort of optimal situation cheese. This is optimal for me. I'm getting the gateways up. He built his gateway real late. He spent almost all his chrono boost on his Nexus. This is ideal for me as the cheesing player. And if this doesn't work out, I know definitively that this cheese is awful. And speaking of awful, here I am just target firing the pylon. I didn't know I actually did that. But it's okay, I managed to fix it. And as we're going to see, that this rush is going to work out pretty well, as you can probably note from this timing. So, great. So Tristan, you know, he's just like, yep, I'm dead, because, you know, it's pretty much 3 Zealots versus my Gosu Micro, so there's a relatively small chance that there's going to be any way he can stop that. I'm going to go ahead and leave this game and load up the next one. So great. Tristan, in that game, says, well, I did seem to be getting my gateway a little bit late. Oh, God, I have to relog all the way back into Battle.net, so I will do so. Yeah, Tristan was saying, yeah, you know, I was getting my gateway kind of late, and I was chrono boosting a lot. Let me make some adjustments for it, because I think that if I spot it, I'm going to have an opportunity to kill it off. So now we're starting to think, how can I not do any big change? Actually, this is Tristan doing this thinking. He's saying, how can I not make any big change to my build? How can I do everything as normally as possible, but still have enough time to transition out of it? Again, he's not going to abandon his initial game plan. He's going to be very stubborn with it. And here's me forgetting to, you know, split my probes. And here's probes, of course, still go behind the mineral patches, just like in StarCraft 1. So, of course, that little bit of rage feels very nostalgic. But yeah, Tristan is not going to abandon his initial game plan. He's going to be very, very stubborn. And I think that's a super important lesson to learn, is to not be so stubborn, because what's very easy to do is someone who's in Tristan's spot to go, oh my god, look how easily he killed me. I need to do something drastic like 2-gate early on myself. They'll do something way different, but Tristan's not going to do any such thing. He's going to play relatively normally. And I think one of the adjustments he could make that's very reasonable is to be getting that gateway on 12 instead of on 13, which is what he did the last game. So I'm going to be doing everything as normal as can be. I'm going to be doing this sort of early pylon back here. One thing to note, the first thing we discussed was, hey, maybe if Tristan makes his gateways by his ramp, and therefore has to make his first pylon at his ramp, that he'll spot this cheese. So we noticed that the pylon just barely missed this probe, but Tristan's still going to do, he's just going to scout up into his base and then back again, which is of course very similar to something like the map Destination, where you end up scouting the skirts of your base to see if the Terran's floating a factory or something like that. And this is considered commonplace, right? It's not some sort of big, gigantic change that he had to make. And notice already, Tristan's actually getting his first gateway before me. And my goodness, ladies and gents, we haven't even been going for 10 minutes yet. We already have 1,000 viewers, so thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Oh, and by the way, so here's something that I'm playing around with. It's always fun to be playing around with maybe just one more thing than is your actual focus. So my actual focus is getting this double gate rush out of the way. But watch as I glitch his probe. Woo! Look, I'm making him scoot to the side. And I was just trying to see this sort of jink. See how he sort of scoots away like it's icy? You know, like it's World 7 and Super Mario 3. Oh, that was a hell of a reference. Yeah, that's something that I think I just noticed there, and I'm thinking, hey, you know, this might be useful at a later point in time. So notice Tristan's getting his second gateway later, and he's saving up that chrono boost for his gateway, getting the chrono boost right away onto that gateway, and he's managing to get quite a few more probes. I can actually get this unit counter up, and note that he has one more probe than I do, but he also has the capacity to add on additional probes, and he's going to be getting his second pylon, cleverly building it so that way he can support this nexus as well. Or this gateway as well. Doesn't want to worry about any of that getting killed off. And he target fires my probe. I think that's a very good choice. And just having an extra probe in there. And of course we're going to whack on each other a little bit. And look, easy peasy. Held it off. No problem. And he's starting to produce decently well. My timing got a little butchered here. But, you know, Tristan's doing a great job of continuing to produce constantly out of his nexus. I mean, we're seeing him start to pull ahead in the probe count as well. Again, we're having equal zealot numbers, but I'm trying to do all this fancy micro and run around, and I'm just like, ugh. And now, yeah, he still has enough to chrono boost. He's having no problem with this, so of course I leave. So this would lead me to conclude that this 2-gate rush isn't quite nearly as broken as it might have initially seemed, but it's still a useful exercise to go through because it does work super well if your opponent has absolutely no clue about it. So a few adjustments needed to be made from that. In other words, in any normal build in Protoss vs. Protoss on a 2-player map, you might want to be building your first pylon early or scouting around your base around 10 or 11 food or something like that, just to make sure that there's no gateways being built inside of your base. The next natural question that we didn't choose to explore, but is still a question that we're keeping in our heads, is how on earth do you deal with that sort of proxy gate, not in the base, but nearby the base? What if I had built it down his ramp? What if I built it off to the side by his natural? That could potentially screw him up quite a bit. So I would expand that to just do the usual sort of proxy scouting methods. Again, Destination in the original StarCraft is a wonderful sort of case study of this sort of stuff. Terrans will regularly, you know, send an SCV just along the top of their base to check, and then when they go out to scout, before going to their opponent's base, they scout to the left and right of their base, just briefly sort of scoot over to the left and into the right, and then they go forward. And it doesn't end up botching the economy or any of their plans too much. And it's still, I still think it's important enough that you're going to need to have that in the back of your mind at least every game. But at the same time, we might explore in the future and note that we don't need to do that scout because, as it turns out, you can just block the ramp as the defender, Tristan, and you know you'll end up okay. But still, I think that was super fun. I had a lot of. We actually tried that several times. And, yeah, it doesn't seem to be the biggest deal. Notice that Tristan did end up gating on 10 as well. I think he maybe could have gotten away with doing something on 11, being a little bit more economically focused. But, you know, no big deal. So we continued to press on and just practice Protoss vs. Protoss. So note now what's so great about the situation. I want to stop regularly and make sure we address this practice buddy thing. We got to tell each other what was going on throughout this entire time, so we got to figure stuff out a lot more quickly. Imagine for a moment if I had discovered this proxy gate. By discovered, I mean Louder told me. Suppose that I'd been trying out this proxy gate on the ladder, on Battle.net. If I won like twice with it, I'd be like, okay, I'm starting to see some decent uses for it. And then I could try this out in all of my Protoss vs. Protosses and win every single time because every one of my random opponents was experiencing that for the first time ever. With a practice buddy, Tristan is aware of it, and I can get feedback in game 2 as to whether it's legitimate or not, as opposed to waiting 20 or 30 games. Because then what happens is, you know, after 20 or 30 games with random opponents, you do that proxy gate, and you win 20 or 30 times, and you begin to convince yourself that the strategy might be stronger than it is. Of course, I generally trust Ladder's judgment, so I'm not accusing him of anything necessarily, but these are the sorts of things. It's like a trap that I don't want anyone listening to this to fall into, to get some idea that a strategy that has won 10 times is a good strategy just because it's beaten random people. Instead, wait a minute and get a practice partner and try a whole bunch of times against that person and see how it turns out. So now we're going to play a standard Protoss versus Protoss. I said, do what you normally do, I want to try something. And the thing I was going to try was just to do some variant of a 2-gate rush. And what's nice about this is something went right in my build. Everything seemed to be lining up very, very nicely. And that was immediately a reason why I saved this replay. Any game where it feels good, save it. And then immediately try it again. And review it and all that good jazz. And of course I'm forgetting to chrono boost because I'm awful. Yeah, there we go. Took me a while, but you know, I eventually got there. Yeah, I was thinking, wait a minute, why do I have this money? I shouldn't quite have this much money. Oh, chrono boost. Tristan's better than I am though, so you know, no big deal. And I'm making my first gateway. This is one of the first games where I actually decided I wanted to focus heavily on building placement. A lot of the times it's easy just to get stuff scattered all over the place, but especially Cathan Luck, who I saw play against Tristan in yesterday's episode on the Mothership, just had such beautiful gridded lines. Oh, it just got me all eager to make things pretty myself. So Tristan's doing his more normal play of getting his assimilator up earlier, and oh, that's cute. I can click on the geyser instead of just clicking on the assimilator. Huh, didn't know that I could do that. Yeah, and notice that he's getting his pylon much later than he got it in the other games that he was trying it out. Just rearranging that build a little bit. So great, getting my first Zealot out. I'm constantly building probes. I don't think I can actually get a second gateway out in time. I'm continuing to chrono boost aggressively. So here I go, I'm getting ready to build yet another gateway. I sent it too early. No big deal, I'll just remember not to send it quite out so soon. So I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember gateway on 19. That, I think, is an important number after this, just because it felt good. I don't know if it is good, but it felt good. This timing lined up quite nicely. So here I am, watch this Zealot. It's about to pop out, and bam, getting 100 minerals again. Starting him right away. So I wanted to be aggressive right off the bat. And Tristan, he's building an early Zealot as well. It's looking a lot like a normal Protoss versus Protoss, you know, where he gets one Zealot and then throws down a Cybernetics core. Or perhaps he does not. There's a Cybernetics core. I got my probe here. And part of me was thinking that I could maybe glitch this Zealot a little bit. The same way I was glitching probes in the previous game. So I'm learning quite a bit here. Pretty fun. Yeah, and look at this. Somehow this timing worked out beautifully. I haven't chrono boosted yet, but when I got that gateway on 19, the other one finished right on time. And yeah, there's my pylon finishing, and both my gateways are pretty much synced. And I'm still chrono boosting probes. Let's just keep this unit counter up here, because we're going to see me start to slowly pull ahead. As I'm building pylons, I want to make sure I don't screw that up, because, you know, building pylons is something that's super easy to forget when you're playing Protoss in general, but especially with chrono boost, you need to be watching that ever more carefully. So I've kind of programmed my brain to freak out about that on a regular basis. So here I'm trying to have fancy micro, which of course means I just butcher it. See, I'm trying to do this hit and follow micro. And I have a probe in the middle of the map who's just, you know, hanging out, having a good time, just kicking it back. So Tristan's getting the early Stalkers, and I think that if there's one unit that's going to get buffed in the later patches, and again, there will be a thorough patch discussion on the TeamLiquid.net beta podcast, I think that Stalkers are going to get buffed a little bit. Giving Protoss nicer sort of advantages against air, and also for this early game sort of junk. And I'm getting messaged on the aim, which of course I will also need to turn off. I'm just super popular. I can't help it. Actually, it's total coincidence. I never get messaged, only during casts. So here I am, sort of continuing to push my advantage, and notice that I've only just now gotten a geyser, and it's only just now finished. And I'm continuing to build pylons. I want to be very gentle with this, with getting gas. I don't want to just way overcommit too soon. I want to continue to put as much pressure on as I can with just Zealots, because I think that, you know, some interesting things can come out of that. I want to see how... Whoa! Easy, computer. I just want to see how this sort of Zealot pressure influences the outcome of the game. So now I'm really getting in here, and I'm noticing that right when Tristan transitioned to Stalkers was a big moment of vulnerability, because my Zealots do 16 damage, they do 8 times 2, but the Stalker just does regular old 8 damage. And sure, he's a little bit faster, but we're going to see that I can abuse it the same way as Zealots versus Dragoons in regular Protoss versus Protoss. So I'm doing a decent job of microing. And notice Tristan's faster, so we can do the stop shoot micro, but of course it glitched out because we're actually having a little bit of lag at this point. But yeah, so I'm going to have one guy just go in here and hit the Zealots. So we're noticing that I'm slowly going to start getting more Zealots as more of these probes start popping. My Zealot's doing his own thing, though. And I have yet more Zealots coming in here. And now I'm transitioning to a Cybernetics core. And I'm getting a second gas, and I'm starting to like just delaying my geyser and getting 2 geysers right away. I just feel like it gives me the opportunity to be really aggressive and then tech in whatever sort of fashion I desire. And also, one thing Tristan was noting in this game is that he got his second assimilator very quickly. So that's the sort of thing that he will want to adjust in the future. We're going to see all these sorts of things come together in the 4th game that we're going to watch today. So here I am, microing my Zealots, Superhero Sean. I really need to be better about targeting that probe. Really need to be a lot better. Pulling back a little bit, butchering my micro a little bit, because we're on fast right now instead of faster times 3. Now we're watching it real time. And then he just has these stalkers back here. So we can micro with it a little bit, but I want you to notice the difference in worker count. I have 30 and he has 20, right? I'm way in the lead in that regard. And also, I'm at 50 food total, and Tristan's at 27 food. So something really right is happening. I actually thought it was decently close. Maybe I was ahead a little bit in the probe count, but I didn't quite realize that I'm almost doubling his food right now. And he's even spending money chrono boosting his gateways. Well, I've pretty much just been chrono boosting my Nexus, or of course forgetting because I'm awful. And now I'm just intending on getting the Zealot leg upgrade and going for some sort of Zealot Templar mix, because I like the fact that I can get extra gateways. And of course, one thing that I continually forget is that if I get warp gates, which looks like Tristan's already researched, units actually build faster out of warp gates than they build out of regular gateways. That's one of the first things that Tristan and I tested out, is just to see the timing of this, because that's really useful to know how the cooldown works. I can tell you right now, units build more quickly with a warp gate, and the cooldown varies upon the unit build. So if I build a Zealot, the cooldown in the warp gate will be a little bit shorter than if I built a Stalker. But the cooldown for a Zealot in a warp gate is much faster than the cooldown for a Zealot in a gateway. And great, just a little bit of research helped give us all that additional knowledge, which of course we will use judiciously to rape one another. And here he is going into warp gate mode. This is pretty cute, you know, sort of warp gating in one at a time. Notice that if you finish a unit and then create a warp gate and then immediately make another unit, you get this big surge of units all of a sudden. So I'm going to sort of hope we see that. Yeah, look, he's getting the warp gates. And I just added on a 3rd gateway. Didn't opt to expand. Think maybe that would have been a little bit better, but I was just in the mood to be aggressive in one base. So I'm going for a Dark Shrine as well, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But for the most part, I'm just thinking Zealots, 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 Zealots. Right, so Tristan, look, he just actually missed it because I'm not the Storm Observer. I do not see all. He didn't really have that many units, but right when his warp gate's finished, he let me try that. Right before his warp gate's finished, he got a whole bunch of sets of Stalkers. Then he built the warp gates and immediately warped in more units. So his army got this sort of big surge forward in size. But I just have slightly too many Zealots. It's just my advantage from the early game sort of extending forward. And at this point, I was actually starting to think, what am I doing? Why did I actually aggressively move in there? I pulled back a little bit, but then I was just like, yeah, it's just going to micro me to death. And here's Tristan continuing to warp things in. Great composition here. Look, replenishing the Zealots. A very important thing, I think, to be doing. So I was kind of like, you know. I really think that final push in was not so prudent, because why did I not wait for this Zealot upgrade? Why didn't I do that? That's obviously something I want to be working on. And of course, at this time I said, hey Tristan, I'm going for Dark Templar, and he was like, shit. And of course, a potential advantage that being really aggressive with Zealots provides is that I can get this tech structure to improve my Zealots, and then just throw down a Dark Shrine and get Dark Templar. And this potentially means that he's going to have a little bit more issue getting a robotics facility up, and I think that's a nice little transition for me to do. It forces him to have fewer gateways in order to defend this. And I make a few more bad decisions. And of course, this is one thing that's nice about Practice Buddy, is that I got to say out loud in this game, Tristan, I'm getting Dark Templar now, and have him go, ugh. Because I'm kind of interested to see how if he's going to be able to hold this off, given the fact that he hadn't quite started a robotics facility yet. I want to help him out so that way my build is a little bit weaker. Because if I can weaken my build and it's still good, then I know I have a very strong build. So here I am engaging before Zealot speed. Oh yeah, only just now did I get Zealot speed, so I think I actually should have been even more cautious with my Zealots, pulling them back even more aggressively. And yeah, charging forward. He's doing, you know, about as good as micro as he can, picking off a probe. And I'm just continuing to expand here, and I'm really starting to get a significant lead. It's a little bit dangerous, I think, to add on too many gateways. I'm adding on another one now, just because I'm getting an expansion up, but there's this easy habit to fall into where you're not macroing so well, so you just throw down a bunch of gateways and neglect on the expanding thing. So I'm thinking maybe 3 gateways is the maximum that I would really have without expanding. Unless, of course, I was in some super aggressive situation, which we will see next game. But I think I need to be more Tristan-like and get my warp gates up earlier. And from here on out, it's pretty much, you know, clean up. I sent a Dark Templar right away into this mineral patch. Trying to do as much damage as I possibly could. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ho, ho, yeah, slashing stuff. So here I come in. Might not have been the best choice, but, you know, I really want to keep the pressure on. I don't really think it's the biggest deal. And I'm getting a forge. I'm trying to play this smart, and I hate that. I don't want to use that word and be like, don't be dumb, because that doesn't really help anyone. But I'm trying to pretend that this is StarCraft 1 in that forges and defense are important, because I always notice that whenever I'm playing a new strategy game, I tend to neglect things for no reason. So for instance, when I first started playing this, I was just not getting any anti-air defense. I was making like 0 turrets as Terran, for instance. I was getting 0 cannons as Protoss. I'm still getting 0 spine crawlers and the spore colonies for Zerg. So I want to make sure that I can force myself to get these sorts of forges. And also, I need to transfer my workers. It's a little harder because I don't have the F2, F3 screen keys. And of course, if you haven't yet messaged Blizzard about that, they do not have screen hotkeys in the game, so that bothers me quite a bit. And look, I'm abusing a tactic. Hiding the Dark Templar, hiding the Templar. And you know, I just like count to 20 and then I just go in there. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. And then I'm going in there, and there's not much Tristan can do about that. He's going to try to do like a final push, but whether it works or whether it doesn't, you know, he doesn't have any workers. So, hey, looks like I'm winning the game. Looks like I'm feeling pretty good. So now Tristan and I are going to have these games come together. We're going to play a normal game, I would argue. But we're going to be aware of the things that we learned in this previous game. And I think it's really important not to get into this one-upmanship battle with whoever your practice partner is. Like, be really fair about it. I remember my brother and I were super guilty of this when we first got StarCraft, you know, way back when, I don't know, I must have been like 10 and Nick was 12. So we were young. It was actually 6th grade is when I first started playing StarCraft with Nick on our little LAN network at home. And we would get in these battles where we would just try desperately to win against each other, which is great. It's super fun to have someone who you're trying to, you know, improve over, and you sort of like force each other to get better. You become each other's motivation. But when you're trying to learn something, when you're trying to figure stuff out, it's really important that you don't become obsessed with little tricks to do. So for instance, Nick and I would play a bunch of games, and I'd be Zerg and he would be Terran in these games. And in the first game, I'd be like, okay, this game, I'm going to lurker drop him. And of course, we're awful back then. Remember, I'm in like 7th, 8th grade at this time. I'm like, I'm going to lurker drop him. And then the next game, I'd be like, okay, well, I already lurker dropped him. So now I'm going to go Mutalisks against him. And then, you know, that would do whatever. And the next game, I'd be like, okay, well, I haven't done either of those. So I'm going to 4-pool him. Now, think for a minute there. It sort of makes logical sense in some sort of sports psychology notion of, oh yeah, I could do this rush right now, and I could win against him with a 4-pool. But you're not going to learn anything from 4-pooling your opponent. You're just going to go, haha, I won. You know, which is not really what you want to be doing at this stage. Instead, you want to be thinking of ways to get better. So I might say something, so Nick might say something like, hey Sean, can you do that lurker drop again? I want to try to be able to beat that. Can you do that Mutalisk stuff again? I want to try to be able to beat that. Now 4-pool me and see if I can hold off all that stuff together. And then, once we practice that, then let's go back into one-upmanship mode and try to actually win against one another. And then we actually have practice and preparedness. If you're always trying to surprise your opponent and try to be some sort of super ninja, neither of you are really going to benefit from that. And sorry, let me just scoot my screen over just a little tidbit there. Oh, that's so perfect. And see, isn't Blizzard amazing? They made it possible for me to watch my old replays in the beta. Jesus. So we're playing once more on Steps of War, which, as you'll note, is a super, super close two-player map. Very, very short rush distances. So, in the previous game, I had this wonderful experience with two-gating. And Tristan wanted me to do something similar to that. Excuse me. But what we're both going to do is we're both going to be aware of the fact that I could proxy gate. One of us could build some sort of gateways here. And of course, we're both a little tempted to do that. But notice, hey, look at this. This is a change that I've introduced to my play, thanks to my practice buddy. I'm building a pylon over here, just to make sure I don't see any probe sort of sneaking in here. And look, he's checking for the proxy gate as well. Cool. All right. Notice that this is the 4th game that we had played that night. And a lot of learning went on. Very rapid sort of acceleration, thanks to being able to tell each other what we were doing. And if I didn't reiterate it, in that 3rd game, I said very clearly, Tristan, I'm going to straight up 2-gate Zealot rush you. I am not going to do any sort of proxy in the base stuff. I'm going to try to do something a little bit more gentle. Of course, I didn't focus on my timings enough. I should have been like, hey, I'm building it at 19 food, my 2nd gateway. Let's see how that works out. We're going to see that come back to bite me in the ass right here a little bit. And, he's teasing me a little bit, coming back here. Jesus, look at his waypoint system. That poor little probe. He's going to be so confused. But yeah, so I built my 2nd gateway far too early. In the other game, I built it at 19. In this game, I'm building it at 15. Just sort of trying it out. Tristan is, of course, doing his usual sort of tech pattern. Continuing to chrono boost away. I'm going to speed up and slow down a little bit. This guy is just now finishing up his shift-click perusal. And then at this point, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't scout. Which is, of course, normal, and is something that you'll actually end up learning more from random opponents, the value of scouting. But, you know, against a practice buddy, I think it's fine not to be too stressed about that. So I'm able to get 2 Zealots out a little bit more quickly, but I'm cutting probes some more here. And I gassed far too early. I think I needed to get that 2nd pylon up earlier. We're actually going to see something here. I'm going to ignore this rush that goes on in his base. Instead, going to focus a little bit more on this. This always happens whenever you have a really good game. You get over-eager in the next game, and you go, oh man, I can gateway earlier, and I can gas even earlier. And then, you know, little things like just constant probe production, constant pylon production just sort of float out of your brain. Now, for a moment, pretend, this is when I knew my build had been messed up, pretend for a moment that I had not built this assimilator. That would be 75 extra minerals, which means I could have about had 200 minerals in order to build 2 more Zealots. And look, my pylon's finishing right now. Yeah, totally could have had 2 more Zealots coming out here, but instead I had to delay it a little bit. I think perhaps I could be able to do a little bit more damage with a 2-gate rush. I'm trying to put the hurt on Tristan a little bit. I'm curious to see when he researches his warp gate, because he was getting that very, very quickly against me, and it was giving me quite a bit of trouble. And I think right now, I think that this is a great way to hold off a rush if you're in the midst of this. Start getting warp gate now. Be chrono boosting your gateway as you see your opponent going for the 2-gate. And then right as your warp gate finishes, you upgrade this to a warp gate and then poop out a Zealot immediately, and then you're pretty much going to be outdoing me in production. So I'm a little bit worried about being super over-aggressive with these 2-gate rushes because they seem very handleable in this matchup. And by the way, I think Protoss vs. Protoss might be my favorite matchup at this current point in time, just because it's so fun. There's just so much microing going around. Look at me clicking like crazy, moving forward, moving back. Should probably try to be a little bit more aggressive. Something that I think is a very good habit to get into is whenever you see even units versus even units, you should go, haha, I'm better than my opponent at microing, and just, go for it. It's very easy to get in that habit of, oh, well, we're even in units, so I don't really want to go for it. And we're noticing that I'm actually behind on probes. He's ahead on probes because he's been spending a lot of time chrono boosting himself. I don't really remember if I chrono boosted my little thingaringaroos, my gateways. I am now adding on more pylons. It's giving me a bit of an issue. But Tristan's more than able to keep up with it. And I actually prefer Tristan's position to mine. Because when you're on the defensive like this, it might feel a little bit more intense, but you're really putting a serious burden on your opponent to do some damage. and you're teching. Look, he's almost done with warp gates. He's going to be getting a third gateway here in a minute. And of course, he wasn't watching his gateways, excuse me, his zealots. And when I see his zealots coming down, I actually said out loud on my mic, Tristan, pull your zealots back. They're glitching out. And he's like, ah, damn it, you know. Because I want to make sure that I don't get a stupid win. Once again, I'm trying to learn here. I'm not trying to just, you know, brutalize my opponent. And then somehow I set a rally point with my Nexus, so like all my probes are just marching forward. I don't really know how that one happened. I'm a little embarrassed about that. But, so right now I've been Zealot rushing a lot. What's my plan here? Well, my plan, literally straight up, is to go Zealots into Immortals. I think that that's going to be a pretty cool combination, because if he gets Stalkers up, which he inevitably will, I'm going to be doing a lot of damage versus those if I can target fire them correctly. And we're going to see me botch that a little bit. So, after Game 3, one thing that Tristan said is, I need to be a lot better about constantly producing to my warp gates and getting my warp gates a lot faster. And of course, I, once again, cleverly forgot all about that. So here I am. See, look, I'm building 2 sentries, which cost mostly gas, so I can get a robotics facility, which would cost a lot of money. And now I'm getting all that extra money that I can use to build a bunch of pylons, which I will need for my Immortals. And he's continuing to morph things in. And yeah, everything seems pretty normal. I'm slightly behind him in food, but I do have a lot more zealots. So, therefore I am awesome. I'm just going to speed things up a little bit. He's continuing to work things in. He's actually getting a 4th gateway, because if you think about it, just with the Cybernetics core, you have zealots, sentries, and stalkers. And the sentry, I think, is the most important thing to note. If you have that extra gateway, or excuse me, if you are making sentries, they really don't cost any gas or any minerals. It's 50 minerals and 100 gas. It's mostly a gas unit. So what this means is that it frees up minerals so that you can get some other units there as well. And considering you don't really need that much gas to be making basically stalkers and zealots, you can throw down an extra gateways and match me with stalkers and zealots and get those sentries up as well. So I like his play quite a bit here. And then I think I do some of the worst force fields of all time coming up here in a moment. Yeah, no, that was his. I don't take credit for that. And then I accidentally hit the wrong hotkey here and open up another Guardian Shield, but it's okay because he just target fires my stuff and kills it off pretty quickly. Tristan's actually doing a much better job of microing than I am in this battle, because really this Immortal should be marching forward and taking out these Stalkers. But I neglect to do that, and really I think this is going to be perhaps the most important part of the day, right? Do not become addicted to the fact that you can hotkey all your units in one group. That was the mistake I was making at the start, and I'm going to change that. I'm actually going to put my Immortals into their separate control group. And that way it allows me to control them very well. And look at Tristan brilliantly blocking off my Immortal in those force fields, just glitching him up. And see, look, he's doing a great job producing out of his warp gates. See, look, all these are in cooldown mode and continuing to add stuff on. And look, he still has quite a bit of money. So that way he can get his next production cycle up. Yeah, look at that. Instantly doing it. And he is chrono boosting it. And remember earlier on, in the last game, I was saying how I really liked 3 gateways in my base as sort of a cap where I would be kind of aggressive, but instead of making a 4th gateway, I would save up for getting an expansion. I was really outside Tristan's front most of the time, so that was actually his motivation for getting that other warp gate. So I don't mind that. So I'm getting Immortals, because once again, Immortals are sweet. And I'm adding on some sentries here as well, mainly because I'm getting kind of low on minerals. I think what I actually should have done is morph both of these to warp gates so that they were faster, and then made Immortals nonstop out of this one, and then added on an expansion. So here we're going to see a battle, and I'm actually going to slow it down before we do it. Yeah, so I put a force field down, and this is, I think, very clearly my biggest weakness right now, is that I have not sat down and thought, how do I want to use my force fields? You know, and I'm thinking just throwing it up behind him is going to be pretty good for the Stalkers, just making sure they don't get in there and kill stuff off. So this is the first time that I actually decided to go straight up for the Stalker with my Immortal. And look at the Stalker just falling so quickly. That's when I actually forcibly did that. And I think that that was an excellent decision on my part to begin doing that. And we're actually going to see my control hotkey group in a little bit. See, right now it's just everything hotkeyed as 1, and I think that that's bad. And speeding it back up again. I think I have yet another Immortal coming. Yeah. And I almost break in here and win, but, you know, Tristan's played this matchup a lot more than I have. Yeah, so once again, see, I'm That looks like 4 or 5 shots that I have done right now on just Zealots. And, oh, I love that move. Yeah. I will take credit for that force field, blocking off the Stalkers. But look at me. I'm still going for the Zealots. If I had gotten in there and just target fired some Stalkers, I think they would have fallen a lot more quickly, which meant my Zealots would have stayed alive a lot longer, which meant that I would have been doing a lot more damage than I had originally done. But still, look, just these 2 Immortals do so much damage. If only I was clever enough to throw down another force field. But instead, I retreated because I'm not really used to using sentries. Something that I will absolutely practice in the future matches. And once again, I think that because I've been playing with Tristan so much, what I'll probably do in my subsequent game with him is say, hey, let's do another Protoss vs. Protoss. I'm going to do this Immortal thing. I'm going to shave off one of these gateways, instead opt to get warp gates earlier, and I want to try to do more sentry stuff. I want to try to bait you down and force field you right here. Because isn't that awesome? Isn't that a great thing to think about right now? Let's say I'm here with all my units, like my Zealots and my Immortals, I'm feeling fancy, and he comes down his ramp with some stuff. This is a very ordinary situation, StarCraft 1, you know, Dragoons and Reavers containing, and how this player busts out. But here, if he starts to come out with Stalkers, Zealots, Sentries, and I force field right here, I cut his army in half, and I can just kill off this group. Containing, I think, is even more important in this matchup. So now I'm starting to go, hey, maybe I actually do like my aggressive Zealot opening, just to set up a contain and get Stalkers right away, and cut him off in that fashion. Cool stuff happens when you play against one player over and over and over again. And of course, I can say to Tristan, now try to come out, and then go gzz and see if that sort of technique works. So we're starting to see how our play sort of melded together from the first 3 games to get this 4th game, where we had all that extra knowledge. And of course, Tristan just has more stuff than I do. And I'm trying to get up here and target fire this thing, but notice that this Immortal glitch, so that's obviously bad. Oh my god, look how fast I kill his stuff. Once I start doing some smarter target firing. And he cancels it appropriately, I feel. But he had been really smart, and he's been continuing to tech. And again, this is a great rule that Tristan sort of, well, I hate to say rule, but an idea, a concept that Tristan's employing right here. If you have some setup that involves an expansion, mentally note what all the pieces of it are. So, in an ideal circumstance, the pieces I would think of are start out with 2 or 3 gateways, then get an expansion down, and then build a Twilight Council, maybe a Dark Shrine, and then make a 4th gateway. Something like that. If you can't get that expansion up, just start putting down the other pieces. So I begin with 2 or 3 gateways, which is what Tristan did. I'll actually come back to the main screen so I can point these things out. Tristan began with these 3 gateways, but I was containing them, so we got a 4th gateway and continued doing the things that he was going to do. And he was continuing to have trouble expanding, so he got a Twilight Council. And then he got an expansion, but he had to back off a little bit from it. And we're going to see how that benefits him greatly here. So I'm starting to push up here. I didn't really target fire this Stalker because I really wanted to bust up his ramp, so I wanted to be killing off the Zealots. And he's warping in here. And then watch this moment right here actually happens. We're going to see that his legs are about to finish, and they're about to finish. So I'm thinking, oh my god, I'm going to win. I need to be controlling these Immortals, but I need to be stop firing with them. But all of a sudden his Zealots get this charge, and I'm like, ah! So I'm like trying to run out. But of course he just surrounds me really easily, and then proceeds to win the game incredibly easily from there. And I'm trying to micro them, but they're like the slowest Dragoons in the universe. It's not really going to work so hot. And look at him, re-warp gating in yet more Stalkers in here. Like, I love the way that Tristan deals with his army composition here. This was one of the things that we noted in the previous game, is that getting too many Stalkers is a little bit dangerous. You have to make sure you have a lot of Zealots, because if I can eat through Tristan's Zealots too early, and he has just Stalkers against my big Zealot army, I'm going to run it over. So he has a little bit more of a Zealot skewed composition, but he makes sure that he replenishes back enough Stalkers here. Excellent composition. And getting another gateway, which I actually think is extraneous here. But yeah, he's just going to demolish me. Just completely murdering me. And he's continuing to charge, and I'm just like, ugh. So I got some sentries, so that was cool. But yeah, I really like that series of games we played. I would have liked to play more if it weren't for the fact that I had school and I had to go to bed. But notice how that we sort of evolved over time. Right? First, we tried out this proxy gate, and then once we had some opinions about that, we stopped and we went back to normal games, but we made little tweaks to our normal games. And in that game 3, which was a fairly normal game, Tristan noted stuff about his unit composition and adjusted it in game 4. And likewise, I noted that I liked the way that two-gate Zealot rush felt, and I was going to transition into Immortals, try to deal with his Stalkers even a little bit more harshly than I was dealing with them before. And we told each other these sorts of things and just sort of saw how they played out. And he was getting a lot of Zealots early, and they kind of drifted down his ramp on accident. I was like, Tristan, pull your Zealots back. So that way we can actually test the stuff out properly. And I think that there was a lot of cool stuff that came out of that game. So in case you don't have a practice partner, go get one. I mean, you can always get great hookups if you go to like teamliquid.net, or I'm sure, Gosu Gamers or SC2GG have forums where you can hook up with other people who are looking for practice partners. And once you do that, just declare what you're going to try against the other player, because you don't want to try to use the element of surprise. You want to use the element of fundamentals, the element of a solid strategy in order to win. And we can see how that's helped Tristan and I quite a bit. And then, of course, once we feel real solid with ourselves, then we're going to go online and try to get as many random people to play us as we can. So that way we can deal with any sort of cheese that could potentially occur. So while we free up the chats, that way people can post a few questions that we can discuss. Excuse me. I want to point out once again that the MLG show match is coming up on Saturday. It will be held at 7 p.m. Pacific time of the epic Artosis against Louder match in a best of 5 on the usual Blizzard maps. It will be every map except Blistering Sands. All the 1v1 maps except for Blistering Sands. So it should be an unbelievably kick-ass best of 5. Thanks once again, MLG, for inviting me to be part of it. 7 p.m. this Saturday. So of course you can watch the Team Liquid Star League in the morning, and then you can watch the MLG StarCraft best of 5 shell match that evening, and then wake up once again to hear me and Shell cast the Team Liquid Star League finals. Of course, of Noni against Mondragon. That's going to be an epic game. So, people asking some things. I want to make sure that I don't answer too many questions regarding, for instance, what they're doing with the beta balance adjustments. That way we can point out things that are specific to this game. Because remember, Team Liquid Beta podcast coming out tomorrow. Botwin says, hey Sean. Hello, Botwin. Does Immortal Shield consider 2 hits of 8 damage from the Zealot swings as 1 16 damage attack and kick it back down to 10? So in case any of you don't know what Botwin's referring to, Immortals have an ability that any damage that's greater than 10 gets dropped right down to 10 if the Immortal has shields up. And I believe it does not actually count for the Zealots. I think that the Zealots have 2 individual hits, which is why the Zealots are going to be really, really strong against the Immortals. That's something that I might want to be a little bit careful about if I'm doing that. I would actually say to Tristan, now that you're going to be getting slightly more Zealots and slightly fewer Stalkers, let's try this Immortal combination out a little bit more and see if it works well enough against the Zealots. So yeah, let's see here. Kadrid, great question, says, you showed how well a Zealot sentry composition works with the mineral and gas costs of each unit. Have you found any other complementary units? I mean, for the most part, just a... I like Zealot Colossus against Terran. I think that's pretty cool. For the most part, though, I'm just going to answer it in the general sense. Any sort of mix of a gas unit versus a not gas unit is a great way to find some sort of base synergy going on there. A lot of times, you can't find a base synergy going on there. So what you do is you just spend it on upgrades. I was actually noticing that when I was trying some Zerg vs. Terrans the other day, where I was going for Hydralisks relatively early on, is that I had a lot of excess gas. So I made sure that I was getting the range upgrade for those. I was making sure I was getting the, as in the groove spine, as in the longer distance range. And then I started getting the range attack upgrade. And then I was realizing that in this build, I was having trouble staying alive unless I got Banelings early. So I got Banelings as well. And then all of a sudden, all my gas is starting to be spent. And it's easy to forget about the upgrades if you don't think about how your resources look. Because the example I love using is that old school Terran vs. Protoss in the original StarCraft, players did not get the upgrades really fast. All of the play revolved around just early factory pushes, just with 5-6 factories. And they had this 2,000 or 3,000 extra gas by the end of the game. And when asked, how are you going to spend that gas? Terrence would go, oh, you just don't need to do it. You just go Vulture Tank. Until Flash comes along and revolutionizes the whole matchup just by spending that gas on upgrades. So in addition to thinking about units for gas expenditure, toss out some upgrade ideas in there as well. So another question that we should take, whoopsie daisies, accidentally hit the switch over button, and I'm back. Let's see. I had a great question by Spirit Wolf I was going to ask. He says, I'm having trouble expanding on Desert Oasis. Any thoughts on how to defend your expansions without leaving your main too vulnerable? Now, Desert Oasis is a really fascinating map because you have this huge distance between the mains, and the ramps even face away from each other, but the expansion is pretty super vulnerable. So what I would say is, if you're having trouble defending your expansion, there's two issues that you could possibly be dealing with. One is that I'm actually going to load this map up and see if we can just check it out right like that. So one is that you're having trouble holding the expansion early. And to that I would say I don't think it's possible to get early expansions on Desert Oasis. The other thing I would say is to think about what your attack path is going to be. So let's pretend that we're at the bottom position on Desert Oasis, and I'm going to try to load up this map so that way we can take a look at it. Suppose you're at the bottom position at Desert Oasis. What is the attack path that you're going to take? So I'm actually going to go here and hopefully we'll get a decent look at this game. Let's go to the create map. You know, it looks like I'm going to have to load up one of my old replays, but I'm still going to make sure that we can actually do it. There's two entrances to your expansion. So I think what's most important to do is to where is that friggin' game? Where is it? Bear with me as I seek and destroy this replay. I might not actually have it, so I'll just poke through this really fast as I continue talking. So there's two entrances to your base, to your natural expansion. And one of them is narrow, and one of them is kind of wide. And down each path is yet another expansion. So what I always like to do is to rally at one of those chokes. So I'd probably end up rallying towards the thin one. Okay, great, now I have the replay loaded. I rally towards the thin ones, that way my units that are coming out of my rally points just pop up right there to defend, but then I attack along the other direction. So when I expand there, I already have all these attackers that are so far forward that my third base ends up being well defended anyways. So here's the map, so let's check the mini-map. So here's the main, and here's the expansion right here. And as you'll note, it's kind of weirdly positioned, because here's our ramp, and units can actually come here from the left to hit our expansion. And then we have this thin choke, so units can actually come up here to hit our expansion. So what I would actually enjoy doing is having all my stuff here be rallied right here. So that way I can hold off any stuff here. But then whenever I want to attack, I would move my big force out this way and then down along this lane. So if we look down here at the mini-map, I'm moving left and then down like this along this path. That way, this expansion becomes defended by virtue of how I'm going to be attacking. And I think that that's a real useful thing to think about how are you rallying for defense and how are you attacking to defend things. So, let's see. About blank 2264 says, have you tried teching to higher units like Dark Templars when in sort of this contained stalemate situation? That's something that I'm thinking of trying to incorporate more and more, because it does what I call forcing your opponent to do things. And by forcing, I mean if he doesn't do it, he loses. So what you do is you kind of say, in all the situations where he doesn't do a certain response, I'm going to win. So let's only think about the response situation. So for instance, if I went 2-gate Zealot Rush into 3-gate Zealot Rush and then got a Dark Shrine very quickly, it means my opponent, so Tristan in this circumstance, couldn't get away with making a bunch of early Warp Gates. And we saw in the most recent game that I lost against him, he had 4 Warp Gates by the end of the game. If I went for DTs really quickly, means he'd actually have to start getting robotics facilities more early. So what I'd probably end up practicing with him, again, thanks to having a practice buddy, is that I would do that Zealot Rush and then rush for Dark Templar. And if I killed him, then he would end up saying, okay, in my build I know that I need to be getting a robotics facility with an observer early anyways. I am forced to do that, because if I don't, there are situations where I auto-lose. We don't want any of that to happen. So then he might start thinking things like, man, you know, I'm needing to get this robotics facility anyways. Can I extend its use? probably by just throwing down an immortal or so and trying to do damage with it in that way. So I think that using higher tech units when we're in a contain is useful, not just because it can do damage straight up, but it can help reveal what are more proper ways to play and more stable ways to play. Let's just go ahead and take one more question because we've been going for almost an hour right now. Oh, and this is a great question. By Davy Bonhua says, or Bonjour, however it's pronounced in Korean, says, why is no one researching Blink? Tristan and I actually played around with Blink and Protoss vs. Protoss, and there were two things that we were encountering. One was Blink seems to be really useful for harassment purposes and for some sort of immediate defense. You can pop your dragoons around, or excuse me, your stalkers around in your base. If he's doing something on your high ground, you can blink right up there right away. But the problem comes when you're microing a lot and being really aggressive. Both players are sort of doing this back and forth, that there really are not that many harassment opportunities, and for the most part, all your focus is right there on the battles. So then part two of the question is, well, is Blink useful in these big battles? The only spot where it's really useful is if you're trying to track down smaller groups of Zealots with larger groups of Stalkers. And the issue I have is, imagine we're teching towards this Twilight Council and we research Blink. The idea behind it is great. Yeah, I can chase down those Zealots. But if I'm nonstop making Zealots and you are making the Twilight Council, therefore you're having fewer gateways and fewer gateway units, I'm probably going to have more Zealots than you the whole time. Even in these games, we see that between Tristan and I am pretty damn close to him in unit count, right? Or excuse me, I should say he's close to me in unit count. He was actually behind me for much of the game. And if he got blinked too fast, he would just blink directly into my Zealots, and it might not end up working out so well. I mean, I can just attack him right there, and I go, oh, great. You got me to surround you as a favor. I just thank you so much. I was trying to do that in the first place. So I'm not so sure Blink is going to be as useful in Protoss vs. Protoss. In the other matchups, undoubtedly, I think that they're going to be great, especially in Protoss vs. Terran. I actually have not experimented enough with Stalkers and Protoss vs. Terran. Frankly, because no matter what I do, it's really easy to win in that matchup. So those are pretty much my thoughts on that. And to generalize it, any upgrade you get, make sure you think precisely what the use of that upgrade is. For instance, I was putting a lot of Zealot pressure on him. I got a Twilight Council and upgraded Zealot legs. Very important to have, because if I have almost all Zealots and my opponent has any ranged units, it's useful to be able to get up in there. So it's bolstering my Zealots by quite a bit. So, yeah, you know what? That's going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 77. Just want to, whoopsie daisies. Just want to unmute the chat. We're going to go ahead and not take too many more questions. Just want to make sure I don't forget to unmute it before I leave, which I have done before. So, you know what? There is the MLG show match coming up on Saturday night at 7 p.m. between Artosis and Louder. We're going to be uploading Day 9 Daily number 76. It normally takes about 24 hours for things to get uploaded after the fact, so that way they can be processed properly. We got the Team Liquid Star League coming up Saturday morning. We got the finals of the TSL coming up Sunday morning, which will be casted by me and Chill. The TeamLiquid.net beta podcast, hosted by me with my special guest Tristan. That will be coming out tomorrow. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And cheersy dearsy.